Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Great, thank you. I'm so excited to have you on and thank you for coming. Matthew's going to be logging on in a bit and we'll get started.
Okay.
Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning?
Great, thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Hi, Margie. How are you today? You reserve some time to make your running better? Chachi, nice to see you. Where are you? Are you running on the beach this morning, Chachi?
Absolutely. No other better place to be.
That looks awesome. Nice to see you again. Hector, nice to meet you.
Nice to see you too.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Miriam is here weighing in. Lauren, our host, is here. Beth, again, great attendance on these calls. Excellent, excellent. And ECBS is here, and we'll have some more people joining us along the way. So I'm Matthew Reardon. I'm from Professional Physical Therapy and Training, and we have our office right down here at the Madison area YMCA. Dr. Lauren is one of our physical therapists. And Joe's weighing in here. Joe's from Sneaker Factory in Florham Park. He's going to be talking a little bit later about different gear to wear. And we also have Tina Marinaccio from, she's a registered dietitian, and she will be giving us some great information about fueling for performance. So we've been doing these Ask the Expert calls for about 2.5 months, and we've gotten some great feedback, and we want to just keep providing more content, more information for you guys. As a practice, you know, we have a community of people who all want to improve themselves and do things to help themselves get better and better. And of that large community of people who are health conscious and always trying to help themselves, runners is a significant subset of the people who are in our community. So we thought, who better to talk about running than our own Dr. Lauren Dolan. So, running in the past few months has really had an explosion again, partly due to the closure of gyms and people not having the ability to get out and do other things that they would typically do for exercise. And I'm so thrilled about that. Running can be universal, but we also have seen more people coming in with running injuries, more calls about what can I do because I just started running again, and they're injuring themselves. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've had a lot of people who have been, runners for years and years, and now with the more time to fill, people are running, they'll just decide to go out and do double their distance that day and overdo it. So we have that wide spectrum of people who are just starting to put one foot in front of the other, to people who are, very skilled and have competed for years, but now have ramped up their training kind of because there's been no time limits on no time constraints or fewer time constraints. So we want to speak to them too. One thing that we typically hear is that people either have pain or they'll stop running for certain reasons. We don't want to hear that. We want people to kind of continue their activity. We understand that running is more than just exercise. There's a mental component too. It's so important for stress release, just getting some headspace time. As Lauren will attest to, part of this program I came up with while I was running. So it's a fantastic mental break and creative time. And I think it's something that we need to be able to nurture and support people through. So, so let me introduce our host today. You'll never guess what her middle name is. It's Dr. Lauren Goodspeed Dolan. I mean, who else would be a better person to talk about this than someone who's actually named? She's Goodspeed. So I think, can we just for today call you Dr. Goodspeed?
Sure, definitely. It's a family name and I'm proud of it. And thank you for, making it known.
You're fulfilling your destiny, Dr.
Yes,
Goodspeed.
yes. Well, thank you, Matthew, and thank you everyone so much for coming on. I'm really excited to share this information with you to keep your running and also just optimize your running. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint prepared. Let's see. Okay. So everybody is ready to go running. Just like Matthew said, we've been in lockdown, the weather's getting nicer and running's great. It's easily accessible. You just go out your front door, limited gear required. You just need your shoes and a good attitude. And there's amazing health benefits. As far as calorie burn, it's the biggest bang for your buck. And it's just good for your heart and your lungs. And then like Matthew said, it's an amazing stress reliever. We're in tricky times right now, and having a routine with your running or just goal setting has great psychological benefits. Regardless of your experience, achieving your personal record or your PR, you need to understand a few things, and that includes what is happening to your body when it's running, and how does that potentially lead to some injuries and how to avoid them. And then how to select a shoe that is appropriate for you and what your needs are, how to avoid overtraining, and are you fueling yourself right with your nutrition, and can you set goals that are appropriate and fit for you and your circumstance. So I identified 10 roadblocks to achieving your personal record, whether that's just completing your first race, or if you want to complete that race in a certain amount of time. And the first 5 are related to pain or injuries in different areas of the body. Up to 92% of runners get at least one injury per year. So it's really important to kind of know what those are, what you can do about it, and why they're there. I'm going to talk about the most common injuries because there's obviously other injuries that can happen, but I'm going to talk about the most common ones for runners per body part. And then the next 5, you also want to make sure you're not lacking or having the wrong shoe for you and what your needs are. Are you doing the right training? Does that include a strengthening or injury prevention program? Again, are you getting the right fuel for your body with your nutrition? And are you in the right mindset? Are you setting appropriate goals for your next race and getting your PR? So we're going to start from the bottom and go up, and that begins with the foot. There's a lot that goes on at the foot, so I'm going to kind of break it down more simply. When you're running, there's times when the foot needs to be flat and flexible so it can absorb shock, and that's called pronation. And then there's times that it needs to be really rigid and supportive, and that's called supination. The foot cycles through these 2 positions, and it actually affects everything up the leg. So when you're pronating, for example, or your foot's flat and flexible, there's a relative internal rotation, or your body tends to go inward, whether it's your knee, maybe a little bit with the trunk. We'll kind of talk about some things depending on how your foot is striking. If you're choosing to do a heel strike or forefoot strike, maybe you have a certain arch height, if it's a high arch or low arch, and how that can affect farther up the body, and just knowing what are some things that might happen to you and how to avoid injuries. So one of the most common injuries at the foot are plantar fasciitis, and it's just an inflammation of plantar fascia, which is some tissue here at the base of the foot. And you could have pain all across your arch, or maybe at the base of the heel, maybe even some spurring there. This can be worse in the morning or at the beginning of the run, and then it kind of starts to feel better. And why it's there is your body is in pronation or flat and flexible for too long, or it goes rapidly, and that can be just you maybe have a lower arch, maybe you're tight in the ankle or in the great toe here, and your plantar fascia has to compensate for that. And then going back up farther leg, there could be weakness in your hips, or maybe they're not firing when they're supposed to, and it's affecting the alignment of your leg, and your foot is sacrificing for that. Also, again, with training, you want to be mindful. Are you ramping up your mileage or frequency too quickly? And most importantly, what can you do about it? So in the acute phases, you can do some icing and self-massage to the area. I actually recommend you can use either a lacrosse ball or like put a water bottle in the freezer and kind of use that to ice and roll at the same time over the arch of your foot. There's small little muscles inside your foot called your intrinsic muscles, and if you kind of focus on strengthening those, and even all the way up at the hip, and then just being aware that maybe if you're tight in your calf or in the front of your toe, and maybe you need to consider different shoe wear, or you switched your shoe recently. So just have to kind of keep in mind of all these things and maybe what made this come about. So Dr. Michelle Milner, one of my work associates, commented in the most recent newsletter for Rose City Runners about having happy feet. And I think this is a really good preventative program. I included one extra stretch that she didn't in the article, but again, doing arch lifts, which is simply kind of raising your arch when you're sitting in a chair, holding that for 10 seconds and relaxing, just trying to strengthen those foot intrinsic muscles. You can put a towel underneath your toes so you have something to grip. Making sure that you're stretching. It's hard enough sometimes to get time for running and stretching, so just making sure that you're getting good flexibility in your calves and toes. And balance work. In this picture, basically, we're kind of trying to create more dynamic demand when you're running. So this gentleman is standing on one foot and he's kicking his leg in different directions. These are just some examples, but there are more challenging and easier versions of balance training that we can do that I can discuss at the end if anyone has any questions about that. So now we're going to move up the leg, and I'm just going to talk about the anatomy of the lower leg. So in the back, you have your calves, and that is a huge power generator. And so you want to make sure you have strong calves, but the thing is sometimes also depending on your mechanics, those can be tight. And so you just want to make sure that you're including some stretching of that area and maybe some self-massage with the foam roller or Hypervol, which we have a percussion device that we have at the office. In the front, you have a couple muscles. And the first one, the tibialis anterior, helps you lift up your foot so you can clear the ground. And then the back, tibialis posterior, helps stabilize your arch. And so what are some injuries that can happen in this area? So we all are aware of what shin splints are, but it's good to kind of talk about why they might be there and what you can do about it. So shin splints are just inflammation of the lower leg muscles in the front and the tendons and tissue around the bone. It kind of feels like a shooting ache over the front of the shin, but only when you're running. And a lot of times this comes on with sudden changes in intensity or volume of running and also your mechanics. So is your body absorbing more shock, or are you not absorbing compressive load appropriately? And I'm going to show you a video of some recommendations on how to teach yourself to absorb shock better. So again, it's good to focus on balance and control. And if you're having any of these symptoms, you should wait until you're like 2 weeks without symptoms before you really get back to running and kind of focus on cross training. Okay, so also you just don't want to ignore these pains because it can lead into worse injuries that might keep you from running for longer or keep you from running longer. So shin splints can sometimes lead up into tibial stress fractures. So that's either a crack or multiple cracks in the shin bone. And it's different from shin splints in that you'll actually feel a specific spot that feels sore, and you feel it all the time, like when you're running, when you're going upstairs, anytime you're bearing weight on your feet. And so again, a lot of times this comes from shock loading. You're not absorbing compression when you're running as well. And also females are generally more likely to get this injury due to leg alignment, just having wider hips, and then leg tends to go in, so you make compensations at the foot and ankle and shin, and why you might absorb more shock there. So if you have a stress fracture in your shin, you usually have to wait 6 to 8 weeks before returning to running. So if you address your symptoms early, you can avoid keeping yourself from running longer. And then also just consider what shoe you're wearing. Maybe there's a more supportive shoe for you that would help you absorb shock better. So here's a quick video of some progression, different progressions for shock loading practice. And I'm just going to play that now. So basically when you're landing, you want to make sure you have your knees in line with your toes. Nice soft landing. You just don't want to make a big sound from the floor. You can progress to lunges. And kind of focus on the descent. So with the double limb hops, kind of coming down slow, same with the lunges, and lateral hops side to side. Make sure you have that light landing. And there's even progressions beyond this, but it just kind of depends on the person. So if you come in for a runner's assessment, we can find something that's perfect for you and your needs. So now moving up to the knee. The knee is actually two joints. You have the tibiofemoral joint where the thigh bone rests on the shin bone, and you have the patellofemoral joint where the knee cap rests on those two bones. There's quadriceps in the front. It actually crosses two joints. It crosses the knee and the hip, and so we'll kind of talk about that later when we get up to the hip. And then you have the hamstring in the back. And the quadriceps actually extends all the way down to the front of the shin through this tendon. So how it moves, there's a lot of rotation that happens here just in the joint itself when you bend and straighten your knee. And if you think about that, in addition to some rotation that happens down in the foot, it's going to relate to this next injury that I'm going to talk about. And we're going to focus on that one because it's one of the more common ones with runners. So I'm sure you've all heard of runner's knee. This is something that people usually ignore for a while too, because you may feel it in the beginning of the run and you just kind of ignore it and it goes away. but again, it's important not to ignore those symptoms so you can keep running and get your fastest time. So patellofemoral syndrome, or runner's knee, is irritation of tissue around and underneath the kneecap. You'll feel a dull ache while you're running that can come and go. And then if it gets to a certain point, you may feel it just when you're sitting, going upstairs, getting out of a chair, or kneeling. You may even have something called crepitus, so you'll get kind of crunching, cracking in the knee when you bend it. And why it's there is there's increased friction due to the alignment or position of the kneecap, or maybe there's some movement going on where there's increased movement. What you can do about it, you can tape the kneecap so it's in a better position. It kind of depends on the person. It's how you would tape it. There's a lot of ways to do it. And then you can do some self-massage with the foam roller, again with the Hypervolt. And you really want to focus on flexibility of the quadriceps, because it extends all the way down to the shin. Maybe there's some tightness there, and that's lifting up the kneecap and causing increased friction. And again, coming back to leg control, that's like a big thing with all these injuries, making sure, is my leg in a good alignment when I'm coming down, and considering that with your mechanics. So moving up to the hip, there's a lot of muscles here. So again, I'm going to kind of generalize it a little bit, but they are big power generators along with the calf, and they also stabilize the leg and the back. So for your movers, you have your hamstring and quads that we talked about before, because they cross both joints, and also your glutes. And people talk a lot about the TFL, which is the tensor fascia lata, and that's up here on the side of the hip. And it attaches to the IT band, this band of tissue that runs down from the ilium or the hip and down to the tibia, or also known as shin. And sometimes it can be tight or irritated along here due to tightness up here in the tensor fascia lata. And so if you're kind of making sure that you're doing some self massage there with the foam roller, again, working on some stabilization training or strengthening at the hip, and also thinking about your foot, like, okay, am I one of those people that pronates for a long time? And so my knee's diving in and stressing my IT band. So I have some hip strengthening progression recommendations here. So starting from kind of less taxing to most taxing, you can do all of these. You're probably familiar with them. But it's good to include in your training, because that way it just sets you up for success in terms of keeping everything stable, everything in alignment, preventing you from injury. So we have clams here, some side leg lifts. You could do a side plank with a leg lift. That's a more progressed exercise. And then band walks with the TheraBand. So moving up to the buttocks region, we're going to talk about piriformis syndrome, which is literally a pain in the butt, and it's due to the compression of the sciatic nerve. It's this big nerve that comes from your back, runs down all the way through your leg. So you may feel some pain and soreness here that can radiate. You do want to be mindful, because sometimes radiating pain can be from higher up in the back as well. And usually this is due to increased sitting. A lot of us are working from home, and so we're sitting all day, and that causes more tightness and compression, tightness of the piriformis and compression of the sciatic nerve. Also your mechanics, a lot of times if you're doing a lot of side-to-side movement with your trunk, whether it's like crossing your arms and rotating your hips a lot, that can cause some tightness in the piriformis. So again, you want to make sure that you're foam rolling this area, making sure that you're getting a good core strengthening program as well. And again, that leg control and muscle control of your leg when you're running. So I don't know if you've been there too, but I definitely have. I finally get to get up from a run. I'm like, oh man, immediately my back is sore. Like, what happened? So the back is pretty complex in terms of what might be your problem is very specific, but whatever the problem is, the why is usually all these things that I've listed. So if there's tightness in the hip flexors, basically that is right here. You can see that the iliopsoas, at least the psoas portion, attaches here on the spine. So if you're tight here from sitting, or just maybe your posture or something, like that can cause increased arch in your back, and that kind of causes some back pain. You could have weakness in the glutes in the back here, or maybe you're not firing them appropriately. So again, that your back is sacrificing it. And then also just making sure your core is strong. We talked about how having a stable trunk, if you have an unstable trunk, and it can affect down the leg. Again, if we're sitting all the time, which is common from working from home, we can lose stability here. More importantly, there's a couple muscles that I want to point out. So we all know about like the top muscles is what we see, but the deep ones, the transverse abdominals, are really important. They're the walls of the house. They're important for stability. They make your spine 10 times stronger. And then multifidi are located in the back of the back, and they help control rotation and stabilize the spine as well. And lastly, if you're practicing diaphragmatic breathing, which I'll show you a video about next, it can help with stabilization of the trunk and also just kind of optimizing your breathing when you're running, increasing your oxygen input. So here's a quick video kind of highlighting the differences between regular breathing and diaphragmatic breathing. Okay. So when she does normal breathing, I'll skip ahead here, you're going to see her ribs kind of raise up and her abdomen kind of goes in, and then she exhales and everything kind of comes up. So for diaphragmatic breathing, it's slightly different. It helps engage those transverse abdominals. You're going to see her ribs go out to the side and her belly rises up. And when she exhales, her belly comes down, and that's when your transverse abdominals engage. So I have some recommended core exercises for runners. Again, you want to make sure you're adequately engaging those transverse abdominals and doing diaphragmatic breathing. So when this gentleman is engaging those before he lifts his leg in this brace marching, and then you can progress to dead bugs. I'd recommend beginning with your legs, and then you can progress doing legs and arms. And to get those multifidi muscles, doing this bird dog exercise again, starting with just legs or arms, and then incorporating all limbs. So thank you so much, Joe, for coming on to talk about shoe wear and selecting the appropriate shoe for you as a runner. And I included his email here if you guys have any questions. But Joe, if you want to take it from here, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Let me get myself unmuted. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lauren and Matthew, for having me on. Just want to take a few minutes to talk about the footwear, which is really the only piece of equipment that a runner is using to protect ourselves on the ground, and why it's so important to have the right one. And I have a shoe wall behind me. This is just a small example of, the not dozens, but 50 plus, 60 plus pieces of footwear that you might see when you walk into a running store. So when we walk in, why do we not just want to pick the pretty pink one or the black and white one off the wall that we like the way it looks? Because we need the shoe to work with us. So why is it important to get fit at a running store or by a professional? I guess the reasons being knowledge, experience. We've seen the injuries, we have personal experience in the footwear, and then the ability to find the shoe that's going to be proper for the use that you're doing it for. Are we training to qualify for Boston? Are we just looking to run and enjoy a few miles every day? So finding the right shoe for the purpose. So again, footwear, our running shoes, are really the only thing between our foot and the ground, that hard man-made surface that a lot of us run on every day, concrete, asphalt. We use the footwear to not only protect our body from the shock, so every time our foot hits the ground, 3 times our body weight is going up into our skeleton. So we need to protect our body from the shock. But then also, we sometimes need a little bit of help from the shoe to kind of control the way our foot is moving after it hits the ground. So the rate of, pronation. So it's very important that the shoe is proper for not only your foot type and your gait, but also that it works in harmony with heel or foot touch down to toe off, okay? So there's 2 types of footwear. Really quickly, this is super basic, but I have 2 shoes here. Asics. We have the ASICS Gel Nimbus, which is ASICS very high cushion, neutral cushion shoe, and the ASICS Gel Kayano, ASICS very high cushion stability shoe. I meet a lot of people who come into the store and they say, I'm an ASICS person and that's all I wear. And that's wonderful, but they don't know what ASICS they wear. So it's very, very dangerous to go to the wall and say, I like this ASICS, I want that. Is it the right one for your foot type? So breaking down your neutral versus stability shoes, and a really, really basic way to do that is a neutral cushion shoe, which is softer and a little bit more torsionally flexible, is made for somebody whose foot does not overpronate. They may not need as much help from the shoe to push it back up in a neutral position. Generally, a medium to a higher arch or a more rigid arch. That's super basic, but that works for here. Stability shoe, going to be a little bit heavier, a little bit more rigid from the arch back to the heel. And this is meant to kind of, when the foot is to the ground and that arch wants to dip inward and we want to overpronate, it's going to help to stop that from happening. So keep the foot in neutral. So how do we find the right shoe? You know, what are we trying to do? So when somebody walks into the store, aside from learning their name, the first thing I want to do is, what are they using the shoe for? Again, are we using it to try to run under 3 hours in the marathon? Are we using it to just go out and walk a few miles every single day? Is it going to be our race day shoe? Is it our workout shoe? Is it our high mileage shoe? So an analogy I like to use, and because I'm obsessed with playing golf on my free time, is I think of my footwear like golf clubs. I'm not going to use a driver on the putting surface to try to hole it out. I'm not going to use the putter from the tee box. So we want to use different shoes for different purposes. So my everyday high mileage running shoe is probably not going to be as fast as my race day shoe. I may not get as much comfort out of that race day shoe for those long volume of miles that I'm doing in training. So again, very basic, but that's the first step. Next is injury history. If somebody comes in and they tell me I have a really big history with, you know, knee pain, hip pain, calf issues, that's going to key me off into starting to think about a certain category shoe before we even get into your gait and your limb alignment and your foot type. So I have a really big time history of calf issues, and it all starts with my Achilles. So I have to wear certain shoes that are going to lever my foot a little bit more, take the flexibility away from that toe spring when I'm toeing off, and just kind of help my calf do a little bit less of the work. And again, that's that injury question, or likes, dislikes. Next, we want to talk about the actual foot and our gait, which is unique to each of us. And even our 2 feet may be a little bit different. I have one arch that's a little bit more flexible than the other. So we want to look at each foot. In the store, when we're actually open and able to do scans of people's feet again, we just get a scan of the foot, take a look at the foot from the bottom, look at the arch, the shape of the foot, and match that up with, you know, the shape of the shoe. When we're walking or running, how much pronation is there, under pronation is there? Do we need to correct anything with the footwear? That's the pronation. Ankle flexibility. I broke my calcaneus, my heel, when I was in college. I was lazy and did not rehab enough, and I have a lot of ankle flexibility or rigidity issues in my right ankle. That leads to a lot of my calf issues and my Achilles issues. So ankle flexibility, very important when considering footwear. Limb alignment, bow-legged, knock-kneed, normal limb alignment. These are all things we want to talk about. And then finally, foot strike. Are we reaching for the ground and striking on the heel? Are we midfoot? Are we clawing at the ground and looking to meet the ground with our toes? All things we want to consider with the footwear. And all that I just spoke about is very, very important. And what we try to do is take that footwear wall and kind of narrow down that bullseye for you. Maybe bring 4 to 5 options that are going to be proper. But then from there, really, what's comfortable to you? So that's when you get to choose a little bit, and we can talk about color and all that fun stuff. But in reality, narrow down the footwear wall, find the 4 to 5 options that are proper for your body type, your foot, your gait, and what you're using it for, and then what's comfortable to you. Soft, more firm, flexible, more rigid. That's really the final step there, aside from the color. And then from there, you know, it's a matter of getting out on the road and trying the shoe out, giving it a few runs to adapt to maybe a different shoe and seeing how it's working for you. And then if there's any issues on the back end, giving us a call, coming back in and saying, this worked, like, you know, to this point, but I didn't like when it was doing this, and then trying to dial it in that little bit further if we need to. So footwear in a 5-minute nutshell right there.
That's great, Joe. I really liked what you said about that shoes are a tool, in that the analogy with golfing. You're going to use a specific golf club or a specific shoe for a specific purpose. I also liked what you said about having a follow-up, because it sounds like you do a very extensive assessment of the client, but also it's always good to check in after and see how is it going and make adjustments as necessary. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Does anyone have any questions so far? I know we're kind of running through everything quickly, and does anything, we can save questions for the end if people prefer.
I have one question for Joe, actually. This is a common question that we get, and it's about rotating shoes. So if you are doing similar runs, I appreciate what you said about different runs for different purposes, but if you're doing similar runs, should people have, you know, maybe 2 sets of the same shoe if that's the shoe that's working for them, and sort of rotate them for each run?
Sure. So get this question a lot. And when I spoke to the different types of footwear, and when we're narrowing down the category to that neutral versus stability, and you know, the purpose is, let's say all the runs are similar and they're to achieve the same purpose, and that's just, you know, general fitness. We're not playing with speed or workouts or tempo or anything. The benefit of having, you know, 2 pairs of shoes is really at that point going to be 2 things. It's going to be, shoes will obviously last longer. That's super basic, obviously. But more importantly is, if we're running every day, or let's say 5 days a week, running is, the injuries we deal with in many cases are overuse of some sort. So it's the same movement and touching the ground in the same way over and over again. And our inefficiencies then become like an injury, right? So the idea when I think about footwear is I don't like to have 2 pair of Asics Nimbus in my rotation. What's happening is they may last a little bit longer, but I'm not changing the stimulus to my leg and body at all. So I like to, you know, let's say we end up at a neutral cushion shoe. And again, the Asics Nimbus. This is my, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday shoe, let's say. But what about Tuesday, Thursday when I'm running? If I'm rotating my shoes, I will probably use a similar shoe, a neutral cushion, a high cushion shoe, but I might play around with like the drop of the shoe. So, you know, the height from the heel to the forefoot, and just change the angle of foot strike a little bit, or the lever when you're moving forward, to just change the stress and move the stress around a little bit. So maybe we can avoid some of these overuse injuries. So in my own rotation, and it's not fair, I have innumerable number of running shoes at home, so it's not fair for me to say this, but I generally in my running shoes try to have, you know, 2 or 3 similar in cushion, but maybe different drops or flexibilities to just kind of change the stress on my calf, quad, Achilles a little bit. So that would be the benefit of that.
It was a fantastic answer. I couldn't agree with that more from a physical therapist perspective, because, you know, you do want that different stimulus. As you said, if you're running the same way with all the same very specific stimulus, you're not going to have that sort of diversity of stimulus that is going to help people be a more well-rounded runner. So that was a great answer. Thank you for that. Where do you get your sneakers, by the way?
Where do I get my shoes?
Sneaker Factory, right?
Yeah, I walk into my stock room and I see what I like.
There you go. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that answer. Any other questions for Joe about gear?
Yeah, I have a question. So are all of your employees knowledge of the sneakers, and, you know, what sneakers should go to make an appointment to see you, and when, who knows when you'll be reopened to do the scan and all of that?
Right, so you broke up a little bit in the middle, I think, there, but I think I got the gist of it. So number one, reopen. That's been something I've thought about since March 21st. When will I be able to reopen? So we are in the process right now of preparing to reopen on June 15th, which is when retail is allowed to come back with, you know, some restrictions, obviously. So I'm sitting in my store here today, and my task today is to break the store up into a few different zones so we can be socially distant and do things properly given the current situation. And every day I make a run to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy my 1 bottle of Purell that I'm allowed to buy every single day. And I'm stocking up for when we reopen. So that said, what we're in the process of doing right now is updating our retail online presence, I should say, so that people have the ability to make appointments with specific people. So if on staff, if I have between 3 stores, if I have, you know, 30 people on staff, I'd say a third of them have been with us for more than a few years, and in the industry for, you know, up to 10 years. I've been, since I graduated college, all I've been in is in the run specialty industry. And then I have, you know, my store managers who all have a few years experience as well. So there are people that are certainly more well-versed, and those are the people when appointments are made that we try to team them up with. Now, going forward, whenever we're in process of developing a new website where we have the ability to form appointments. When that's done, people will be able to say, I want to make an appointment with Joe. When is Joe available? When am I available? And we're able to make that appointment. So yes, that will be something we do going forward. And anytime somebody calls and they have, you know, an extensive injury history or just a really hard time finding footwear, we try to team them up with, you know, a more experienced staff member, obviously.
I have a question as well. I love what you're saying about having two different shoes, and that allows for a lot of variability and adaptability for runners. What do you say to clients when they want to come in and have a completely different shoe, like maybe trying a minimal shoe or kind of get into barefoot running? Is there any recommendations that you mention to them?
Yeah. So I think like it's really important to consider what we've used in the past before saying, I want to just do this, right? So if somebody comes to me and they've been wearing a big bulky stability shoe and their goal is to get into super minimal footwear, it's achievable, but it's not that same day. And I think a lot of the time we want something to happen that same. I'm the same way. Like, I don't like buying things anywhere online for anything because I like going somewhere and having it that day. I'm extremely impulsive. So I'm not good at adapting. So over long periods of time. So when someone comes in, they want to change, you know, essentially we're changing our movement pattern and how we're absorbing shock. It's kind of stepping down. So in terms of, you know, I'm wearing this shoe and it's really supportive and it's really cushioned. Where do I go from here? We're not going to go and say, all right, just go out on the road and run barefoot or in your socks or something right now. We need to kind of step down. So we might go and we might find a shoe that is cushioned, but it's got a lower drop on it. And that's gonna start to get us into that position where we're meeting the ground more level, more natural. It's engaging the calves and the Achilles a little bit more and running a little bit more naturally. But we can't go from step 1 to step 9 overnight. So it's kind of a process, and they're kind of explaining how we're going to do that, you know.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's so great to be an adaptable runner, but also consider like what you're using your tool for, and then kind of weaning into it, whether it's, you know, with the kind of shoe, like you mentioned, or your distance. Like you said, don't go out in your new shoe and run your regular distance and stuff.
Sure.
Maybe pare it down a little bit. So that's great information. I'm so glad to hear that you're sharing
I
that.
think and also for what it's worth, I think the internet is a really powerful tool because we can go on there and we can find any bit of information and experience from someone that we want. And we generally, if you want to run in something or achieve something, you can find some testimony online and tell yourself it's achievable. I want to go and I want to hit my drives 320 yards. I can't do that. So we have to work within our set of bounds and kind of adapt along the way and do that and just understand it's a process. And in many cases, I think it's really easy to, want to take this piece of footwear and make it right for you, or say, I want to run more injury free and this is the footwear that's going to do it. And in many cases, as long as we're running in the right category shoe, you can run, efficiently and midfoot strike and move really naturally in a traditional 12 millimeter drop shoe. If you're striking the ground level, you're going to move efficiently. And an analogy that one of my old coaches told me, because I was always a real pain in the butt about, what shoes I was going to wear and et cetera, et cetera. And he told me, one day he just said, Joe, it's not the arrow, it's the archer. And I thought about that for a second. And I realized that it's really about like how we're moving and how we're getting to the end result versus only the equipment. And we only want to blame the equipment, but there's so much more beyond that. And that's where also you guys come into the equation.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I agree. Like, runners run, and shoes are your tool and have a specific purpose. And thank you so much for all this information. I included Joe's email on the slide here. So if you guys have additional questions for him or any other interest, you can email him that there.
I just want to thank Joe as well. I mean, I think that's excellent that you're have a progressive mindset. I think so many runners get into the mode of like, oh, I've worn those shoes for years, or I've trained this way for years. And like, I think runners are creatures of habit. And
Yes.
that's when they hit the wall, and
Absolutely.
they try and do the same thing that they've been doing, just doubling it up or something. And then they hit the wall even further. So, you know, just like you can't hit your drives 320 yards, runner's not going to be able to just break through that wall, sometimes without a little bit of coaching, a little bit of expert advice from yourself, from physical therapy. That's what we're really there for, to stop the frustration that people have and say, listen, there is a way to get there. You just have to, as you said, you can't go from step 1 to step 9, but there's so many other little steps along the way that people, they don't even know that those steps exist. And it's professionals like yourself and Dr. Lauren who can really break down those specific steps along the way. And we're all optimists, and want to believe, and we do believe that people can get there. It's just, we have to kind of show them that there's a process to it. So thank you. That was
Matt, if I could just say one more, take 30 seconds, say one more thing. And this is away from footwear, just a little bit of advice that's always helped me is, a lot of time we think, because of the sports we grew up playing, soccer, baseball, football, whatever, is to get faster, I need to run harder, or I need to run faster. And that's not necessarily the case. And like the most important word that I try to explain to people is like stimulus. And that whether that be a different piece of footwear, a different type of training, a different volume of training, but you can't do it all at once. So how do we get faster is staying healthy. And how do we stay healthy? And that's obviously we stay healthy by not getting hurt, and that's really basic. But think about the stimulus of your training. If you're going out and you're running 50 miles a week, and you're not mixing up your speeds at all, maybe consider, doing one longer run and then a shorter, faster run. Just think about changing the stimulus of your training a little bit. And generally, you're going to see a pretty big jump in a shorter amount of time. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, because that's how we end up with these injuries. And that's it. I'll stop.
Very well said. And I think that's a perfect segue to when we get back to Dr. Lauren's second part of this, about talking about mixing it up, the types of training that we do, changing the stimulus. One of the things that that we have is the Alter G, and getting people to a level that they would even never be able to understand that it is even possible by doing some unweighting things. So all that different stimulus is a great way to progress people along. So awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. I don't know if you're to hang around for any questions that come up later on in the talk, but if you have to jump off, we thank you very much. Joe's at the Sneaker Factory. They have Florham Park offices, Millburn, and Bernardsville.
Basking Ridge, yep.
Basking Ridge. And they've been around, for many, many years, very high trained staff at all the stores. That personal attention, just, we like partnering with you guys because we're all about personal attention, and you guys provide the same thing. And so thank you very much for partnering with us.
I would love to be able to hang around. I have a customer who I think has called my phone 4 times now that I'm going to have to get to. So if anybody does have any questions or needs anything, you can email me and I will absolutely get back to you ASAP. Okay?
Thank you, Joe.
All right, guys. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
You too. So that definitely just goes right into what Joe was talking about and what I'd like to talk about next. It's not about how much or how fast or everything you're doing. It's, are you training smart? Are you getting the right variety of stimulus? And you have to consider your experience and kind of what is the purpose of the next thing. So is this your first race? Are you first race at a particular mileage? Are you trying to get that certain pace during the next race? You want to be careful with progression. I wouldn't recommend going more than a 10% increase in mileage per week. So again, going back to kind of what the purpose is, what's your distance going to be in this race, and give yourself enough time with that limitation of increasing in mileage so you avoid injuries and overtraining. And also, you just want to allow time for cross training. Matthew brought up the Alter G. I think that's a great way to cross train and decrease your risk of injury. And we have a slide to talk about that in a little bit. You can also bike and swim. That translates really good cross training for runners. And just make sure you're strengthening and getting rest as well. So there's a lot that has to go in to a training program. And so just being smart about it. to avoid injury. Again, going with that variability, consider what type of route you're doing. Are you mixing it up with the hills, the surface, your route? Just making sure that you're able to be an adaptable runner. And then as far as speed goes, to limit kind of injuries from impact, repetitive impact, you can just do some agility drills versus actual sprinting. And I have a video of some examples of that in just a little bit. And lastly, you want to make sure you're allowing your time for rest and refueling with proper nutrition. So here's a quick little video about kind of how to increase your speed or turnover explosiveness. Oop. I don't know what happened. There, I guess. Okay, so just making sure with this one that you're light on your feet, just to avoid a repetitive shock to the body. This is a leg control exercise. And good for strengthening. And then working on that explosiveness, just making sure that you're light on your landing. And this kind of relates even to that shock loading, but makes it more of a strengthening exercise as well.
Lauren, can I just say something about the strength training and the agility things? So again, runners are creatures of habit. They have in mind they want to get their mileage in, and that is important, but that often crowds out time for these other things, and it's always an afterthought about the strengthening. And you may have to, as a runner, you may have to, you know, maybe cut your miles back or cut your time back a little bit to make time for these other things, because that, just like running consistently will produce results, strength training and stretching consistently will produce results. You can't assume that, hey, I did it once in that week and I'm not feeling any better with it, so I'm going to abandon it. It has to be done very consistently to show some result. And I think runners tend to, you know, the stretching and the strengthening tend to be an afterthought. And I just can't stress enough how important that is. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So moving on to discussing about the AlterG, this is a tool used by various professional sports in the U.S. Olympic team, and it has amazing benefits. We have one in the clinic. It decreases the impact on your joints because you can adjust the amount of body weight when you're running. You get metrics about your cadence, stride, and weight-bearing symmetry, so you kind of have an idea of how you're running, how it affects your body. And then if you're kind of managing any injuries or certain injuries, you can still train and not interrupt your training program. We have a short little video discussing more. Okay. So now I get this, the sound should be working. Oh, there we go. Well, so this is just showing how it's set up. It inflates to, and we can adjust your body weight or your impact here. And during this time, it's getting measurements, and we store those measurements and metrics for you to compare with subsequent runs.
The irony of the video is that her form is not really very good.
Okay.
So as far as the AlterG goes, I'm going to click back on that real quick.
Sure.
There's an assumption, well, I think there's an overwhelming feeling in the community of runners that the treadmill is like the worst thing ever. A lot of people feel, they call it, I've heard the dreadmill is one thing. I've also heard it called Satan's sidewalk. Anybody else? We have other runners in the group here. You want to either chime in or write in the chat what you call what you would feel about the treadmill itself?
Hamster wheel.
Hamster wheel. So there's not a huge appreciation for like the regular gym treadmill, and I want to make sure that people understand this is not necessarily we're getting you on a treadmill to run, but we're measuring your stride, we're measuring your cadence, we're measuring your weight bearing symmetry. The first time I did this, I was 60% off to my right side. I mean, I was like, I had no idea that I was that far off. We recently had somebody who had constant hip pain in her left side actually, and the assumption was that she was maybe, yeah, it was her. The assumption was that she was, you know, running on the side of the road, and it was unweighting too much on one side and putting too much weight on the other, was overstraining. We got on the treadmill and we found out it was completely the opposite. So then we were able to adjust her program and realize she needed, you know, a different type of program based on her weight bearing symmetry. So that was really important to be able to get to see that and then develop a specific program for her. As far as running on a treadmill, if you're working out in the gym and we're asking you to, you know, bench press 100 pounds and you can't do it, we're going to start you on something lighter, and then we'll perfect your form. We'll get you your stride, your cadence all correct, and be able to teach you, and you'll get that movement pattern down to know what it feels like to run at a higher speed, at a lighter weight. And then we don't adjust the speed, we actually bring your weight back up, and then by the time you reach 100%, now you're running that speed. This is a, you know, a way to break through those walls. This is a way to get to that point that you will never be able to feel otherwise. It's really an amazing experience. As coming on as a participant with this, we're offering everybody a chance to give this a try, and it's amazing what you'll feel when you do it.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to hand it off to Tina, giving her nutritional recommendations for runners. Thanks so much for coming on, Tina.
Thanks for having me. So I was going to share my screen, but it says that I can't share it while another participant is sharing.
Oh, can I
be able
stop?
to unshare, and then
Yeah, here, I'll stop
I can
sharing.
get mine up.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, hang on a second. Here we go. I was having some trouble with Zoom today, and I don't know if I'm supposed to update it, but hopefully this will all work out okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yay! All this stuff is great when it works, right? Okay, so basically I'm going to go over really just a primer for preparing to train, you know, some snacks that you might want to have, hydration, which is really important, and then recovery. And really, you can apply this to, whether it's running or maybe you're doing biking or triathlons, or you can apply it to an event. So it'll be kind of a broad stroke. You know, I studied sports nutrition at NYU, and I had to memorize, you know, grams of this and milliliters and formulas and all of this stuff. And then when you go out and you work with people, you realize that a lot of that kind of goes out the window, and it's very, very individualized. A lot of the people that I've worked with sports nutrition actually came to me for weight loss. So they would lose weight. We'd be on this continuum. They'd start exercising. Then we had to give them more carbohydrates and support sports performance. So I'm going to present some stuff here, and just know that just pick a few things that resonate with you. Everyone's different. Okay. So, you know, be your own case study. But first, before we start, I'm going to just go over some pre-event or pre-training meals of elite athletes. So we always want to see, like, what are they eating, you know? But these people have this really innate talent, so it might not always be what's best for you. So let's look at, we all know Michael Phelps, right? So this was a typical breakfast before training, 3 fried egg sandwiches with fried onions and mayo and omelet, grits. He's from Maryland, so you know there's lots of butter in those grits. 3 slices of French toast with powdered sugar, 3 chocolate chip pancakes. I'd be like a lead balloon if I try to jump in a pool after that, I think. I like Mike Barrowman, Olympic swimmer, a Domino's, pineapple and onion pizza, Big Mac and fries. So he can obviously tolerate fats very well. I typically ask clients to do high carb, moderate protein, and low fat. And the reason is because carbohydrates digest within about 15 minutes to an hour. Protein takes about 2 hours, and fats can take like 3 or 4 hours to digest. So it can be kind of heavy. Also, fats float, right? Did you ever make salad dressing and you shake up your container and you leave it on the counter? What happens to all the oil? It floats to the top, right? So you don't want that pressing on your esophageal sphincter, could cause reflux. So again, everyone's different. If we look at Venus Williams, definitely lean proteins like chicken and egg whites, green drinks, plants, vegan. So she tends to go for more like a plant-based lean protein, very low fat. This is a very low fat diet. Andy Murray, porridge. Some of this is a little cut off with the image, bacon, beans. So he's from the UK. It's a typical breakfast. Any of you that have been to Ireland or Scotland or UK, and then the rest of it's just very balanced. Wayne Rooney, soccer player. I love this. Cocoa Pops on match day mornings. I'm kind of down with that because it's so easy to digest. He probably can't tolerate tons of fat. LT, you guys remember LT, only drank orange juice. He wasn't a small guy. And then I love Herschel Walker. If you guys remember Herschel Walker, you know, on many NFL teams, Heisman Trophy, then went on to be very successful in MMA. And he said, I have a God-given talent and I don't care about food. So nutrition wasn't even on his radar. But I think the point is, you know, everyone's different. I have clients, if they're going to do an event, they're really kind of keyed up and it's kind of nerve wracking and that they really can't tolerate anything, but then someone else can have a cheeseburger, right? So I know it's fun to look at what some of these athletes are eating, but you have to find out really what's going to work for you. And I always like to recommend, just as a baseline, a good solid anti-inflammatory diet. In fact, I have a really nice blog link on that. I think what I'll do is I'm going to ask Matthew, which Matthew will probably send a follow-up email. You're going to get a link to this. So you'll have all these slides, and I'll ask him to include a link to that article because it just will give you a good primer. Because if you're eating pretty well most of the time, there's really not a lot that you have to do if you're going to be exercising for about an hour or less, running for about an hour or less. We do want to focus on hydration, which I'm going to get into. If it's an hour or less, it's not likely that you need a sports drink. You know, you could probably be fine with just water. A snack a couple of hours before. I'm going to give you lots of prime examples. And again, I like to mix, if it's tolerated, carbohydrates, fats, and protein. The carbohydrates are really where your fuel is going to come from. So more carbs, moderate protein, and then a little bit of fat. If you
want to give me the that blog now, if you know it off the top of your head, that way when people hear it on the replay, they can go to it. If they're not on our email list, they can get
Sure.
it.
You know, if you just go into your web browser, type my name, and then type anti-inflammatory diet, the blog will come up. It'll be the first thing to come up.
Tina Marinaccio.
And then just type in anti-inflammatory diet, and you'll see the article come up. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
I would do it, but I'm afraid every time I hit escape, I couldn't get the Zoom to open back up. So it's working. I don't want to touch anything. But if you're going to be running for more than an hour, then you really do want to eat a complete meal a couple of hours before. Some people clear food faster than others. So it really depends on your GI tract, you know, mixing the 3 macronutrients, and just be a little cautious with caffeine, especially if you're going to do an event. That could really cause some GI distress. And also if you're using gels and things like that, that's when you really have to pay attention to your fluids. If you don't have enough fluids with gels because of the types of sugars, they will actually get stuck in your stomach and give you a stomach ache. Now, if I have a client and they say to me, you know, I have an arrhythmia, you know, they're probably not supposed to have caffeine anyway. Or if they say I have a lot of anxiety, or I'm not sleeping at night, or some people have a genetic mutation that they don't really metabolize caffeine. In fact, I have that. If I just have dark chocolate at night, the caffeine will actually keep me awake. So again, that's kind of case by case. Otherwise, it's a really safe and cheap ergogenic aid. Okay, so what are we aiming for, you know, when you're training, or if you're going to do an event? We really want to maintain glucose. Now, in today's landscape, banking is very, very easy, right? We do everything online. You can access all your money at any time. But I used to use this analogy with sports nutrition, and that your blood sugar is kind of like cash. If you think about currency, your blood sugar is cash, your glycogen is checking as far as accessibility, and fat is like savings. Because many years ago, you actually had to take a bank book and trot down to the bank to get your money out. So really, we want to try to maintain your glucose. So a good strategy is to keep some kind of a log, and really think about what your goals are. Because again, I've had a lot of people that use running to maintain weight loss. So we want to make sure you're not over fueling. So there has to be a balance. So I typically will recommend snacks be about 200 calories or less. Now, these are high carbohydrate. Again, these will clear within 15 minutes to an hour. So they should be tolerated pretty well by most people. And these are pretty portable. You can actually run and eat most of these. Some people, if it's a long event or a long run, people sometimes will like to eat also. So things like fruit cups. So you can buy squeezable fruit in little packets, and they're pretty easy to carry. Like Go-Go is one brand. You can just get like little packets of applesauce, things like that. Now with some of these things, the only problem is some people can't tolerate fiber very well. So if you're one of those people, maybe keep it more to simple carbohydrates. Like applesauce has the skin removed, so there's not as much fiber. And, you could also use some sports drinks now if you're getting into that above the hour range, even diluted fruit juice. I'm a huge fan of tart cherry juice. There's lots of research with tart cherries and its anti-inflammatory effects because, even though exercise is good for us, it also causes inflammation in the body. So there's good research with marathon runners and tart cherries. Now, if you take some juice and you dilute it by 50% and add a little bit of salt to it, it's going to be about the same profile as a Gatorade. And what those electrolytes do is it's going to help you to hold on to fluids so you don't get as dehydrated. And it's also going to provide some carbohydrate so you can replace some of the carbohydrate that you're losing from your blood sugar. Okay, and then hydration. I think hydration doesn't get enough attention. It's so important. Just a 2% loss in your body weight from water is going to impair your performance. Okay, so if you had a couple glasses of wine last night, you got up, you had a couple cups of coffee, and then you went out for your run, you might have noticed, you're a little sluggish because maybe it could just be that you weren't hydrated enough. So it is important to try to drink frequently. I know it's a pain to stop and drink, or it can be kind of cumbersome to carry fluids, but it is important. Carbonated beverages are discouraged because they can cause some reflux. So, but one good strategy would be to weigh yourself before and after you train. All right. So let's say you weigh 150 pounds, you weigh yourself, you come back from your 1 hour run and now you're 147. Okay. That's a 2% weight loss. So, you could try to take some of those, try to hydrate a little bit before, and then take some of those fluids and spread it out while you're running. A good rule of thumb is to consume at least 2 cups of fluids for each pound loss. So the recommendation is actually 16 to 20 ounces per pound. And if you have something a little salty, it'll help you to hold on to the fluids. Now, as far as electrolytes, some people they might have a higher sweat rate. Some people lose more electrolytes. So for example, let's say you wear a ball cap when you run, and when you come home, you take it off and it dries off and you see this white ring on it, or you get a white ring on your shirt, then you're a salty sweater. Or maybe like when the sweat's dripping down, you can taste salt. Then you may need more electrolytes than the person to your left and right that's running with you. One good strategy that's really easy is to check your urine. I tell my clients that your urine should be about the color of lemonade or a little lighter, and that's decent hydration. So you can see the color as it starts to get a little darker. That's when you know you're getting to the dehydration zone. So you may not even feel thirsty, but you could still be dehydrated. Okay, so needs vary. So I just give an example here. And again, you'll have these slides. So if you want to use this just to calculate for yourself, I gave an example. Someone weighs 150. They went for a run. They're down to 148.5. So now they know they have to figure out, how do I try to compensate for that 1.5 pound weight loss. So you can actually do that on your next run by bringing some fluids. So here I have drink 6 ounces of fluids every 15 minutes. Most people can't tolerate much more than 6 ounces at a bolus. And also, you know, you may need to then stop and drink. And just see what you can tolerate, because you don't want to feel that sloshing around your stomach. But 6 ounces is usually about an accurate threshold. So this weighing technique, do this different times of the year. We use more fluids some points of the year. And in fact, you guys brought up treadmill running. You know, if you're running in a gym, you might say, well, I didn't sweat as much because in the summer they have the air conditioning so low, it's freezing in here, I'm hardly sweating. But just breathing, you know, respiration, when you're breathing in very dry air conditioned air, your lungs, you lose a lot of water because your lungs have to moisturize that air. You need to humidify it. So even in cold, dry climates, we do lose a lot of water. Okay, and then recovering. So what we really are looking to do is to try to get back our glycogen. So we use blood sugar first, and then glycogen, which is stored in our liver and muscles as energy, and then fat. You know, we're always using kind of a mix, but predominantly. So glycogen, we want to store that again. Think about what you're doing really. So you're not just recovering, you're preparing yourself for your next bout of exercise, whenever that's going to be. So the hallmark ratio is a 4-to-1 carbohydrate to protein. Low-fat chocolate milk is very, very popular because it's so easy. So if you could just drink like 8 ounces of low-fat chocolate milk, and that will give you that exact 4-to-1 ratio. It's cheap, it's, you know, pretty popular. And the recommendation is, if you can, try to start recovery within about 30 minutes. And some people, after they run, they just have no appetite. So I find that liquid calories, I think, are a little easier. So try that. If you're someone that just, you know, you have no appetite after training, try some liquid calories and see if you can tolerate that. But the reason why there's this window of 30 minutes is because, you know, when you're done running, your blood is still pumping, okay? So now we're gonna add in some carbohydrate so we can get an insulin action. And then that's gonna help you absorb the amino acids, and everything's gonna get circulated and absorbed better because your heart rate is up. Everything's gonna be moving around more quickly. All right, so the 4-to-1 ratio, we need carbohydrate. You wanna replenish your glycogen, but we need that insulin response so you can replenish your amino acids and make sure that you're building muscle, you know, and not losing muscle. So here are some examples, some tangible snacks that are a 4-to-1 ratio. So we have whole grain bagel with a couple ounces of turkey, a couple cups of whole grain pasta with 3 ounces of lean turkey, and smoothie. Now, protein powders, typically 2 scoops are about 26 grams for most brands. So that's what this recipe is based on. So this will give you a 4-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. Okay, and then some other snacks, some things, you know, maybe if you're going to, say you're going to a park and you're going to run with your friends, you could throw something in a cooler and bring it with you if you're going to be away from the house for a while, but you want to get your snack in. These are some things that are just really easy to assemble. It's not even really cooking. So I personally really like fruits. I like fruits a lot because they also help to rehydrate. Fruits have a lot of fluid. And then of course it has carbohydrates, so you can replenish your glycogen. And then also it's, all fruits are high in potassium. Okay, so it's a good source of potassium. So it's really, to me, a perfect package. And then some grab and go. So rice would be a carbohydrate, edamame is a protein. Yogurt, it counts both as carbohydrate and protein. Berries count as a carbohydrate. An apple is a carbohydrate, pear is a protein. So you see we're mixing different macronutrients here. We're still keeping it pretty low fat. An exception would be a whole grain pita with hummus, because hummus, unless you make your own and you don't put oil in it, or you're buying non-fat hummus, it has a lot of tahini. So long as you can tolerate, you know, sesame butter and you're okay with the fats, that's fine too. Okay, and then some more things that are portable for recovery. I like cheese and fruit kebabs. Those, and you know what, kids like that too. So if you have kids that are playing sports or kids that are running, and you're sitting at practices, or maybe they have times between events or something like that, and they want to have something, this is something that they can assemble themselves. So that way you're getting them involved too. Trail mix you can buy in packets, you know, or make your own. So you'll have access to these slides. So any of these that might resonate with you or look appealing. What I really like is the last one, the small whole grain pita with ricotta cheese and Granny Smith apple slices. It's kind of, it's savory, it's tart, it's sweet. There's something about it's kind of refreshing after a run with the Granny Smith apple. And these are really kind of grab and go. Some of the things you can carry and consume on a run if it's a long run and you feel like you need to replenish some carbohydrate. You know, maybe you don't tolerate things like hammer gel or goo because, you know, they can be very harsh on the GI tract. So these would be a little bit easier. And in some of these you can actually carry and just and take little bites and run, or to have after or before. I like Trader Joe's. I think has a lot of good products. They have the single serving trail mix. So they have these little, it's a bag of 10 packets. So that's a good choice. Easy just to throw in your purse or your car. Freeze dried fruits. It's very light. Apple crushers and pre-sliced apples. So that makes it really easy too. Okay. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So you have access to the slides. And again, just remember it's very individualized. Just pick a few things, keep a log, see what you can tolerate. You know, don't forget to weigh yourself before and after. I think hydration is probably one of the most important things that people don't pay enough attention to. It really is going to impact your performance. And if anyone has any questions, if you want to, let me see if I can. What I'll do is I'll do the stop share. I said I'm afraid to mess with this. If anyone wants to put anything in the chat, I can look at it.
Yeah, there's
the
actually
Phelps
one
menu.
that came up from Margie. Do you have a recommendation of a protein powder or a certain brand?
Yeah, so I personally recommend to my clients, it's a brand called Zymogen, and it's with an X. You have to get it through a healthcare practitioner. If anyone is interested, they can email me and I can give you the information. It's not a direct-to-consumer item. For direct-to-consumer, I think that brand Vega is decent. It's plant-based. They have some that have lots of vegetables, and the brand Orgain I think is good. I think you can get these at like Target and the supermarket, and they're very accessible.
Can you spell them? Vega, V-E-G-A?
VEGA, yeah.
And then what was the
Absolutely.
other one? Orgain?
Orgain. Mm-hmm.
And I had another question. You recommended turkey a fair amount throughout snacks. I've heard that cold cut turkeys, you know, if you get it from the deli counter, that those are so full of preservatives that they're really not healthy. Do you think that, or do you have do you recommend a certain kind of turkey?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of nitrites. I personally buy a turkey breast and roast it, but I know not everyone's going to do that. There are brands like Applegate Farms. So really all it should say is turkey and salt. Yeah, so the nitrites are there. They preserve the color, but that also could be a carcinogen. So
Great.
that's
you.
something to avoid.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any questions?
I'll just chime in right now and say, you know, if you've not worked with a dietitian before, Tina is absolutely amazing. She's taken people from, you know, again, I'll point out the idea that some people don't even realize their full potential until they start working with a coach. And Tina's one of those coaches where, you know, bringing people beyond their own expectations. And we've seen tremendous differences, changes for the better with people, whether it be through rehab or just personal goals. And, you know, we're so honored to have her as part of our extended family. And you've been great to come on, not only this, but one of our Ask the Expert calls. So if you feel like you just want to get the most out of your training, out of your life, I mean, honestly, we are what we eat. We shouldn't just think about nutrition when we're running or participating in some sort of sport. You're always preparing yourself in a nutritional way for work, family time, running, weight training, all that stuff. So I can't emphasize enough that these little things that people take for granted. I think a lot of people, there's a barrier that people say, well, I know what I eat. I know what I should eat. I'm just not good at doing it. It's so individualized, and you really need to work with somebody specifically like Tina to get to that level. And it's amazing to see when people do get to that level. It's like a whole new vista that they can appreciate. So, you know, we're so glad to have Tina as part of our
Thank you.
So just say your website. So if people are listening back without seeing the slides, say your website and how we can get in contact with you.
Oh, it's my name, tinamarinaccio.com. So I can TINAMARINACCIO.
Yeah, and you've got a very, very nicely done professional website. Also, Tina has been sharing some of her kitchen quarantine pictures. I want to go over your house every single night. I mean, it's you don't just say it, you live it, and the
Yeah.
things you're doing, you know, within your own home and your own cooking, it's just amazing. So follow her on her Facebook and make sure you check out her website, and really do yourself a favor, get in touch with her, because it's such a missing link that people just assume that they know, and you don't know what you don't know. So but Tina does know it. What's going on, Tina?
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Tina. That was great.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I'm just going
Pleasure.
to share my screen again here to get back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So moving on to other things that you want to think about, it's so important to have a strength training program. We kind of went over some recommendations that you can do to avoid injuries and or how to address certain injuries, such as the core program from a previous slide, and also the Happy Feet slide. But sometimes it's very individualistic. Like maybe you don't know what to do, and I would recommend getting a runner's assessment, because if you're just kind of doing things that you find on the internet, or just that even just from this lecture, it's not specific to you and your needs necessarily. So it's always good to be very efficient with your strengthening program, so you can you know, do what you need to get stronger and prevent injury. And the last of the 10 roadblocks or things that can prevent you from reaching your personal record is your mindset and how you're setting your goals. You want to avoid not getting the expected results in the expected time frame. It's always good to have a plan. So you need to be persistent in terms of being consistent with your training program. You know, things are going to come up obviously in life, and but in general, like, are you consistent with your training and not trying to be like a couple weeks out before your event being like, oh my gosh, I need to make up for that time that I wasn't running or doing my rehab or strengthening exercises. You need to listen to other specialists or other runners, get an idea of their experience running a certain event if it's your first time. Or like with Tina and Joe, just and myself, like what are some things that you can do to you know, train smarter. Consider your availability. There's a lot of great programs that people will recommend to you, but what is your availability to train, and how are you going to balance that with work and family, and making sure that you're getting your rehab in and your strengthening as well. And also just be nice to yourself and picking your goals. Like some people are like, this is going to be my goal and that's the only one, I'm going to train for that. And I think it's good to do that sometimes, but just give yourself a little wiggle room, like set a conservative goal, be like, okay, realistically, maybe I could get this goal or in a lofty goal, because you never know how training's going to go. Like maybe you'll get an injury, or maybe things come up that you get sick and you can't, you know, reach a certain goal, and that way you'll be more successful. So I have a little bonus info. It wasn't included in the 10 things, but just from personal experience, I have 2 little kids and I love running, and there's some things that came up after I had my kids and while I was pregnant that I wish I knew at that time. So I thought it was important to share those with you. And so there's certain things that you have to realize when you're trying to maintain your running during pregnancy or after you have your baby. When you're pregnant and even when you're nursing, there's changes to ligament laxity. And so your joints are a little more unstable. As you grow and the baby grows, it kind of changes the alignment of your spine. And so there might be like more compression on certain areas, as well as obviously different like weight gain and stuff. And so there's increased force on your joints. So there has to be a big emphasis on your strength training and maybe some supportive gear. I really recommend the Fit Splint. It's like this neoprene band that they have one for when you're pregnant and also postpartum. And it's just nice because you can adjust it for what your needs are and to you. Whether you need some more support at the hips, in the back, maybe you're getting some abdominal separation that you're kind of managing. So that's something that I would highly recommend from personal experience. And also when you're returning to running, yeah, again, just give yourself a lot of time. It took 9 months for you to, you know, grow your baby and stuff. And so even as an experienced runner, I was like, oh, great, I'm cleared to run. I'm just going to go run my usual routine. And that didn't work out so well. So just add an extra phase to your training or when you sign up for that next race. So just a quick review, we covered so many topics and there was such great information. So I think it's good to quickly go over it just in a nutshell. So first we covered the major injuries that runners get and what you can do about it. They're just listed right there. And then Joe gave us some great tips about picking the right shoe for you. It's very individualistic. Shoes are like a tool, or your golf club, you want to use the right shoe for what you need and what you're going to do, and also have some variability within that. You want to train smarter, make sure you're doing cross training, some speed work drills, add your appropriate mileage depending on your training program and what your race is going to be, and variability too in your route and what the terrain is. Tina gave us some great tips of how to hydrate yourself and have the right snacks and make sure you refuel appropriately. Again, don't skip the gym. Make sure you're doing some core strengthening, some hip strengthening, injury prevention program, whatever that might be. And again, we're here to help at Professional PT and Training. So if you're not sure what you need or what you need to do, or maybe there's something you were doing but it's not working anymore, please come in, because we're eager to help you guys out. And I can empathize with you know, any roadblocks when you're training, just like, oh, I just want to get to this run and do the best that I can. So again, when you're planning your next race or your next personal record, just, yeah, have a plan. Those that acronym we use, you know, be kind to yourself, think about your availability, listen to others, and just be prepared or persistent with your training. So I'd like to open up for questions. I know that was a ton of information, and I'll check out the chat here to see if there's any in there I might have missed. Okay, so it says, how often should you do strength training? So it depends on, again, your availability and the person and stuff, but I would alternate. I never really recommend running 2 days in a row. So I would kind of alternate your program with your strengthening program with your running program. So that usually ends up like, so for me, when I ran my first marathon, I was in grad school. So I realistically could only run 3 to 4 days a week. And even though a lot of programs, training programs are like, you need to run 6 days a week. And I implemented some strengthening program in there too. So I was like, wow, okay. So I really only did strengthening twice a week versus, and then ran like the 2 to 3 other days. So you just kind of, again, have to assess your availability and just make sure you're alternating your running days with your strengthening days. Any other questions? Feel free to shout them out.
Lauren, what about, you know, the question we often get in the clinic is, you already touched on it, but can you break a little bit more down about, hey, I'm a new runner, or I'm getting back to running after an injury. How can I progress?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I broke up a little bit.
About the progression.
Oh, the progression.
When is the right time to progress?
Okay, so basically you just kind of have to look at what event you're doing and how much time before that event, your availability, and then how many weeks are in there. So again, you don't want it to be more than a 10% increase in mileage per week. Even if you have, maybe if you have a lot of time and you're a new runner, that could be 5%. So somewhere within that window is a good kind of number. But again, it's very individualistic. And then also, like Joe went over, you have to think of injury history and stuff, and maybe you need another phase or more time if you're kind of currently dealing with an injury, and allowing yourself to kind of build up strength. I don't know if that answers your question.
Awesome. Very good with that. The other question that I think we hear often is, we get a call on the phone and someone says, well, I'm having pain with my knee. It's not too bad yet. I just want to know, should I ice it? Should I heat it? And, how long should I let this go? Should I run through this? And the strange thing with some of these running injuries is they actually get better sometimes within the first like 2-3 miles or something. What would you say to somebody who says, well, it hurts at the beginning, but then when I run a few miles, it gets better? What professional advice would you give to someone who's asking that?
So I don't know if you guys remember that slide. I think it was about the patellofemoral syndrome or runner's knee. Is like the gentleman had his arm off and he's like, oh, it's fine, it's just a flesh wound. So I mean, not to say that you're going to lose your limb or something, but often ignoring pain, even if it kind of comes and goes, you just don't want to set yourself up for a worse injury. So again, like if I get that question a lot, like, oh, my shoulder hurts, what do you think it is? Or my knee hurts, what do you think it is? And what should I do? And again, it's just based on the person. And so you can do some quick fixes or ignore the pain, but you're just kind of you're not setting yourself up well for success if you do that. And I think it's kind of, and even personally, like I used to play soccer in college and I did that all the time. I was like, oh man, my back hurts, but I'm just going to keep going, and then it go away and I forget about it. And I have back issues now that I have to manage because I didn't address it then. So I think if you get through the run or the race and you didn't have an issue, but you still have that pain, and then you're just further down the line, it's going to come back at you. So I'd recommend that they come in and just get a program, even if it's just one visit, and just like, okay, try this, check back in. Kind of like, again, what Joe said, where he's like, okay, try this shoe, but I want to follow up, so we know how you're tolerating it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Any questions before we wrap up? Everybody going to take this information and go out and have the best run this weekend?
What's your favorite cross training?
Yeah, so for me, it's changed over the years. Again, I was in grad school and then I used to live in California. So there's a lot of things I could do outside, go swimming, all that kind of stuff. I actually prefer using the bike. It's not as accessible to me now because I have children. So getting to the gym can get a little tricky, but for me, I really focus on doing drills like I showed you in terms of like getting speed work done, and kind of I'm limited on time, so you can kind of get your heart rate up and kind of work on that. So that's been my jam lately.
Okay.
But I would, in a general sense, I would recommend using the AlterG or a bike, just because you get so much information and it transfers well back into the sport that you're doing.
Great, thank you.
I'll mention the AlterG again about a lot of serious runners use those for recovery runs. So it's just a different method of getting you moving again. It's keeping your movement pattern going to get you from one run to the next. And so it can even be done between your normal days of running because it's not putting that weight bearing load on it. It's also it's a brain game as well, as you know, how we can work on those little different aspects of the movement. So all right, if no one's got any more questions, we'll wrap it up there. You will be getting a coupon from Sneaker Factory, great coupon. I think you get a free pair of socks and a good percentage off your next purchase. I think Joe was really great to come on. So please see him in his store in Storm Park, Millburn, and Basking Ridge or Burnsville. They're one of those two. But they're great over there, Sneaker Factory. And you look for a blog from Tina, and as well, you guys can feel free to come in, try out the Alter G. But Dr. Lauren is also going to make herself available to do some individual running assessments, just to kind of get you on track. You know, we're getting into a really good season here, and we want to make it the best for all of you. We hope that, you know, some of the runs that you maybe had been planning for are going to be coming back online and being live events again. But definitely participate in those virtual events too. That little goal and accountability helps us also keep going. So thank you so much, Dr. Lauren.
Thank you.
Speak.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for participating today. Email us, call us if you have any questions, and we will see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.